last 3 years, AWT, at least for the first year when we did AWT exercises, it was very much, a new thing for all of us. And, all of us were unprepared. Gradually, second year, we realized some bit of it, and we were still, figuring out. By now, third, fourth year into AWT, you would realize it's not very different. It's not very tough. In fact, it's easier than the VAT that other IIMs do. It's just the testing out on your critical thinking skills. So that way, it's a different format than a VAT is. VAT, you can throw in information in a proper structure and get some marks. In AWT, throwing in information makes no sense. Whatever is written, you have to analyze it. So knowing or not knowing that topic is useless in that case. It's futile. That's how AWT is different. I have a set of slides for me, and then Shreyansh will narrate his experience and give you some examples. Are you in at Ahmedabad or back at home?
I am in Ahmedabad.
कौन से dorm में हो?
Old
New
dorms
campus,
है
old
थोड़े.
campus? Huh?
These are the old dorms where I
Old
am.
dorms. So okay, great. So let me share my screen and switch off my. Where is my presentation? Very nice. I can't share my screen. No, no, I can't present here. यार ये गूगल मीट ना थोड़ा अलग है. Always tough. Can somebody help me out how to share the presentation here?
In the below, there is beside the hand raise, there is a button to present now, I guess.
Yeah. But it's not showing me. Acha, because I'm in incognito mode, it is not showing me.
Okay, we're logged in, so I guess not logged in, so I guess they won't.
अरे रुको यार फिर एक second. How do I do this? Wait now. Give me a. Let me mute. Now, guys, am I audible?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
So actually, I've kept that session open. But is my voice echoing? Oh no, I would be hearing my own voice.
No, I think it's fine.
Wait here. How do I do this? This is becoming tricky. Mm, let me do this.
So just mute the tab, another open tab.
What should I do?
Right click on the tab, there you will get an option to mute site.
Acha. No, no, but I am muted. What is happening is.
No, you are not muted. Like you won't be able to hear the voice from that tab.
Acha, acha. And how is that done? Sorry, yaar, I think I am becoming more.
Right click on top of that tab, and there is a option. I guess if you are using Firefox, it would be mute tab or Chrome. Or
Acha. Now, okay, no, I can't still do it. Wait. Always block, continue camera, manage. Arey yaar, this is becoming tough. Uh, Give me a sec. Let me open this on different tablet.
screen is visible.
Sorry, guys. Am I audible now?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm sorry. My apologies. I think I got stuck with managing this. I'm not good with meets. Uh, is the screen visible now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So I'm just going back to my presentation. Are you guys able to see the presentation?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So, guys, very briefly, and sorry for this delay. I think I'm getting older with these things. Uh, the session, typically when we did this session last year, we had it for VAT and AWT together, give a sense of both of them. But this session is purely focused on VAT, AWT. Why AWT is different? As I told you, AWT, knowing the topic, having a knowledge about that topic is not important. It's very much focused on the analysis of the text or the argument that is given there. Uh, a very close parallel to AWT that you will see a real life application is when you are taught on a case based pedagogy at IIMs. Also, a lot of case interviews that are done for especially management and strategy consulting, and even in product management, you would see the application of AWT process and thinking process that goes in. Broad areas that an AWT is testing you on is your ability to think and formulate an argument, right? Uh, that's very important. When we will give you some sample AWTs, and I think we have around 4 or 5 AWTs planned for you, you will realize that some of these are very weak arguments that are being presented, or some of them are just some arguments that are being presented. Now you have to critique it, or you have to support it, or you have to find policies into it. So basically, what it's testing you out is your ability to think and articulate that, right? uh, as with all VAT and write-ups, clarity, cohesiveness, and all this matters in all the write-ups. So whenever you are writing 3 4 paragraphs in an AWT, make sure you are using simple words. Make sure you are stitching a cohesive paragraphs, right? One thing with IIM Ahmedabad, and typically I would say with all IIMs, but the holy trinity is avoid using jargon. uh, uh, you know keep it very simple. The sanity checks that you have in mind, it's an if an older version, handwriting was important. Now handwriting is not important unless and until it's a handwritten AWT. But if it's a handwritten AWT, or if it's a handwritten exercise, ensure that you have a legible handwriting. Some of your handwritings, at least the ones that I've evaluated in VAT 1 and 2, after that I've asked to give me text, typed out copies, are really difficult to read and gives a lot of headache. Make sure your writing is fairly simple in that way. Some simple vocabulary, knowing grammar, knowing the correct tense to write. Changing tense arbitrarily is a faulty way of writing. That's important. Comprehending what is written out there is important. And obviously putting out a relevant and topical area. This is for AWT VAT, both in a way structure, something which I've already told you in in the previous small Discord message that I posted around SOPs around the VAT and all. Introduction, typically 3 paragraphs, and conclusion. Now a 5 paragraph kind of a write-up is a decent write-up, with paragraph comprising of 3 to 4 sentences. That's a very decent thing. Now in some cases, when you're unable to form all the 3 paragraphs in the middle, you can typically follow an introduction, paragraph, and conclusion approach. Just 3 instances, right? If you're not able to break down things into 3 paragraphs. Introduction is important. It's an attention hooker. It's the place when you lay out the context of what's there for you to analyze, right? Paragraph 1, 2, 3 is where you actually critique that topic, or you elaborate on that topic, or support that topic, or you point out policies in that topic. These paragraphs should be well stitched. And conclusion is where you keep a stand of where you stand in this topics. Now some AWTs you might not have a conclusion, right? But typically 90% of AWTs you will have some conclusion. Focus on have a clear focus for that also. Typically a heuristic check for a good write-up is, even if I lack time to read the entire 1 page, if I'm quickly skimming through, reading just the introduction and conclusion should give me a sense of what you're planning, right? Introduction sets the context, and conclusion, I know where you stand, right? So even if I omit reading those paragraphs, if introduction and conclusion should be so, self-explanatory in nature. For an AWT, what is important is once you read out the AWT, understand very clearly what is the argument or the evidence that is being presented. I refer to it beyond syntax and tautology. Tautology, if some of you know, is I don't know what it is. It's a figure of speech, I guess, right? You have to read between the lines. You have to understand more than what is written out there, right? The second step to it, assume that the argument is weak and find out the weak links of the argument. Typically, that's the best approach. Start with an assumption that the argument is weak, and you can point out multiple reasons for that. That the data is not enough. That's the easiest thing that you can say. The data is not enough to make this argument, right? Or the data is selective in nature. That makes this argument. So it's in a short way, it's just an opinion, right? Based on one small survey that lacks credibility or something like that, right? In an alternate approach, if you are supporting the argument, you have to find out the strengths of the argument, and then you have to build it up with other kinds of information that you have on that topic. Typically, most people end up working with assuming the argument to be weak and then approaching to the AWT, right? Fifth approach to that is whatever AWT that you're getting. In most cases, it works out that you assume the argument to be weak. You say the data is not enough to make this argument, or make this as a conclusive argument, or make this as a causation correlation analysis. And what you can further strengthen your AWT by saying what other data, study, or evidences you might need to actually make this argument, right? With examples, we will corroborate a lot of these things. And this is the last point is very important for an AWT. These AWTs are, anchored in logical fallacies and biases. One of the most common ones is correlation does not necessarily mean causation, right? If there is a correlation, it necessarily doesn't mean that X is causing Y, right? Typically, when you will do regression analysis in your first term for stats courses, you will see a lot of data sets where, for example, there can be a data set where, the amount of milk, the amount of goat milk that a country produces, and there's a GDP data set. And once you plot it and, you regress that data points, you realize that the R-square value, which is a regression coefficient value, is very close to 1, which means it's a strong correlation. But definitely no one can make a causation argument that the amount of milk the goats are producing in that country is translating to a GDP growth in this country. But definitely between those two sets there's a correlation. So correlation does not necessarily mean causation. The another bias that you need to check is confirmation bias, right? And it's again and again, most topics you encounter some sort of confirmation biases, right? The third one that you need to realize is the premise of the argument based on opinion on facts or data. Once again, as I said, typically this works out to be a very strong approach in which you can say, the data is not very strong, the data is not credible enough. It's just a random survey that has been done. We don't know what's the approach of the survey. We don't know what's the sample of that survey. And it's not a very reliable data to make a very definite conclusion about this entire argument which is happening. There is an exaggerated generalization or a hasty generalization. This is again a fallacy, where you see certain patterns in certain empirical data and you make a generalization, oh, this is how it happens. A typical way, a very crude example is, people talking about diversity and, making an argument against meritocracy, that any diversity that you're trying to inculcate is antidote or it's an antithesis to meritocracy. It's just based on a certain empirical data that you might have, or even an empirical hallucinated data that you have in your mind, right? So just be check for these fallacies out there once you're writing AWT, right? AWT, how is it different from that? I have told you even in the starting of the session, it is a test of your reasoning and critical thinking ability. It's not a test of your knowledge. If a topic or an argument is around cricket, it's not a test of your knowledge of cricket. Writing general knowledge will only lower your marks in an AWT. Rather than, you need to attack straight away what's being asked. You need to find the flaw in the argument and present it, right? Rather than giving out gyan on that topic, showing that you know a bit about the topic. But in case if you're stuck and you are unable to critique that argument, unable to understand that argument, unable to properly structure a 4-5 paragraph thing on that, you might venture out into meandering into general knowledge to ensure that you at least present something out there. Important pointers, very important: avoid jargon. I'm telling you this for the PI, for the VATs, and for the AWTs. As much as you avoid jargon, as much as you avoid words that really fall into a Shashi Tharoor kind of an vocabulary or a Paul Theroux kind of a vocabulary, it's not going to give you any brownie points. Keep it simple. Keep using words that are extremely common in nature. Don't go out for fancy words. Sometimes we might not even know how these words are used. For example, esoteric is a word which is now has become quite common. A lot of people use it, but esoteric has a different connotation, different paraphrasing, right? This word like I think lymphophilia or something like that. It's a very typical word which is borrows from a Latin or something like that. It's being used, but doesn't make a lot of sense. Whereas elixir is another word on that lines. But ecstasy is a common word. Words which are commonly people can understand without referring to dictionaries or thesaurus is something you need to use. Avoid extreme stand. I've always told that avoid extreme stand unless and until you're really able to back it up. Avoid extreme stand. Avoid colonial millennial lingo. Of course, this is very well understood, using WTF and using whatever Gen Z millennial lingo that is there out in the market. I also don't know half of it. Avoid using that. Avoid meandering on what is not asked. This is very important. Unless and until you fall short of arguments, don't meander and roam around, saying things which don't matter to the topic. Now, this is something I've commonly observed in some of the VATs that I've evaluated. AWTs we will evaluate now, so we'll see how it is happening. But in AWTs, some of you are going around the topic or going somewhere different trajectory from the topic. Avoid that. Avoid circular reasoning, using the same logic again and again in different paraphrasing and reiterating the same point. It doesn't make sense. It spoils it up. Some tips in the end for you to remember. These tips are going to help you in business school life also and post business school life also. Use small and simple sentences. Long sentences are very tough to comprehend. At times becomes very convulsive, very complicated. If the punctuations are improperly put, they can give wrong meanings. Try to use active voice. I believe that lends a lot of control to what you're writing, and break down the text into simple paragraphs. Simply you will realize things which are broken down into simple paragraphs are easy to read. I don't know how many of you follow Ankar Wariko. I've read some of his blogs. I'm not a big fan of him, but he writes bullet points. Now, bullet points is bad, but he writes very 1-2 line paragraphs. That's also bad. But having extremely long paragraphs is bad. So 3-4 sentences paragraph, break it down. 3-4 sentences paragraph, break it down. So this is an approach that you need to follow. So that is it from my side. Now wait, let me just stop sharing. Oh, there's a parallax effect going on. How do I stop sharing? Yeah, I stop presenting. Now I will give you a few examples of what AWTs have been coming in the past, and giving you some sense of how to approach them or not. And definitely for last 3 years and last year we had a tremendous conversion rate with IIM Ahmedabad. We have realized the only one way to crack AWT, and that is practicing at least 4 to 5 AWTs. No matter how much we give you examples, unless and until you face it, unless and until you're put into that shoes in a time bound manner to critique that argument, you're not going to learn from it.
What limit and time, like if you can just mention.
Yeah, time is something Shreyansh will add. I always forget it. Let Shreyansh come in and I will give him the stage to add. I think it's 20-30 minutes. The time in most cases with all IIMs is sufficient, unless and until it's a cap or something like that. They are very fast. Otherwise, most IIMs give you sufficient times to, read and, think, form arguments, and then write. So time won't be an issue. But as I said, it's very similar to case interviews. You can refer Victor Cheng, you can refer a lot of things, you can do a lot of case mocks, see a lot of case mocks, but unless you give a lot of cases yourself, you're not going to get the confidence of facing a case interview. In a very similar vein, AWT, no matter how much you read, how much there is available on the internet, how much examples you read, once you attempt it, give it a shot, and read some of what your peers are writing, you will realize where you are missing and how you do it. So exercises for AWT are going to be very, very important. If you have not taken VAT very seriously till now, at least take AWT seriously, because VAT, most of you are decently good with English, you can write good VATs. I'm yet to come across any VAT, at least in my groups, which are so bad that I have to point out to that person, you need to focus on your writing. There have been excellent VATs, but most of them, fall in the very 80 percentile kind of a zone, which is a decent thing. So let me give you some examples. By the way, last time and last to last time, some of the groups were lucky or unlucky enough to have an AWT in the form of an image, which means there was just one image that was put out, and in that image there was some caricature which had some shop or something, some people inside and some people outside, right? And they asked you specifically, what does this image mean to you? What are the assumptions you can draw from this image? What is your stand on this image? Something like that. So it's a very creative test in that way. That image, you could actually relate it to racial segregation, something for which Martin Luther King and the Black movement happened in the United States. Same rights for all. You can talk about, you can make very different inferences, and how creative you can be and how logical you can be is what would be counted. So some groups in the past have got an image-based AWT. If you fall in that lucky unlucky zone, it's up to you. Typically 99% of the candidates get an text-based AWT. Let me give you some example of AWTs, or at least one example, and then we'll leave it to the AWTs that we have planned out. The AWTs that we do are a mixture of what has been given in the past. So if some of you have access to what the past AWTs is, please don't have a look at it, because that's going to bias your thinking right away. Some of the AWTs are the ones that we have designed based on what are the AWTs that the IIM Ahmedabad process has been asking, so that you guys get an exercise on it. So, for example, one AWT is, and this is a typical example on the internet, so I can spoil it up. NGOs, are spending money on advertisements, and they're making, they're spending too much money on advertisement to present a story to you guys, and they're not doing anything real welfare out there, because the poverty levels are still very much the same. Hungers, malnutrition is still very much the same. So, we should stop donating to NGOs. This is a typical, I don't remember the exact phrasing, but this is what a typical 4-5 line that you will get. Now, automatically, things that will click to your mind is, a lot of you, if you go to YouTube, would see an advertisements from certain, NGOs, or, asking you to donate for certain causes or certain individual, helping them out, right? Now, what a typical approach in this AWT is, and that's the easiest one, unless and until you have something of your own and very creative, is, I think it's a hasty generalization based on insufficient data. A lot of NGOs have articulated and supported a lot of good causes and brought in a good policy change and actually have changed things on the ground. An example that I could cite is possibly a Nobel laureate from India. Who's the guy who got a Nobel Peace Prize? I'm forgetting his name.
Kailash Satyarthi.
Kailash Satyarthi. Kailash Satyarthi. His NGO, typically has worked a lot in that zone. Or, there are other good NGOs, you can think of, which have really made some ground impact on the ground. So what I would say is, straight away reading this topics hold some credence. There are advertisements that are being done, but there is no data, there is no backing information that you can make this as a conclusive stand out there. And that's a simple reasoning. Once you get it, all you have to do is you have to write an introduction to it. You need to further corroborate it. You can say, if I have XYZ data, if I have data from the government ministries, if I have data from the United Nations or other agencies, multilateral agencies which are working in that, and if that data is being added, that the ground impact of these NGOs has been very feasible in terms compared to the funding that they have been raising. Yeah, then we can still make a case that the funding is going into a waste to these NGOs. Otherwise, it's a very hasty generalization based on a random opinion or based on certain empirical evidence that one might have got. So it's, I think, cherry picking something and making it into a generalization. That's how you would approach this VAT. Typically, another VAT that I can remember, I don't know if we have planned this for you guys. I don't think so. We have planned this for you guys. Is most you Advait Naik, you'll have to make these arguments. I don't remember exactly what that entire AWT was, but broadly this is how you would have to approach it, and you will have to cite examples and give examples. Another example of an AWT that I can think of is, let me give you a very crude example on top of my head. Because I'm not sure the other example, if we have planned it for you, it's useless, so that I don't spoil this topic for you. How many of you come from North India? I believe quite a few of you, right? And how many of you, if you have been following climate for the last few weeks, barring the last week, North India was experiencing a lot of cold waves. And a lot of countries are experiencing cold waves and extreme climate in that manner. One could make an AWT saying that people are experiencing extreme colds, there are hailstorms, there are snowfalls, temperatures are dipping more than they should be dipping. Global warming is a farce, right? Now any person would say it's a false argument to make. By the way, one of the presidents of United States, or if I'm right, it's the 45th president of the United States, actually made this argument in one of his speeches, Donald Trump Jr., that we are experiencing cold waves. Where is global warming? A lot of politicians on the right actually make this argument. So if you're presented with this data, how would you approach it? What you're going to say is that this is typically I don't know which fallacy to put it under, but it's typically not being able to look at the long-term picture. You have evidence to the fact that Earth globally is experiencing extreme climates. That is a fact that everyone knows. Additionally, what you can play out and say that climate operates in a long-term horizon. As humans, we're not able to think that long-term, because by the time you actually witness climate change impact, it usually takes 3 decades to 4 decades to see that happen, right? And humans are not accustomed cognitively to think that long terms. We are more accustomed to what I call as a recency bias. That's the bias that whatever has happened to me recently, or whatever comes to my memory from a short-term memory, I tend to form my opinion on that. So you have to attack this from a recency bias, that a climate change impact plays out in the long term. And by the time you have a visible impact that is observable on you, things would have moved far worse. and it would have taken 3 decades for that to happen, or 4 decades for that to happen. So to make a recency biased argument based on just one empirical season that we have witnessed, that to an extreme climate, right, isn't a strong argument to negate that global warming is is a fake phenomena, or it's a fake news kind of thing. So this is how typically you will approach AWTs. You typically assume the argument to be weak. You say the data is not sufficient, reasoning is flawed, reasoning is based on recency bias, it's a confirmation bias, it's a circular reasoning, it's some other sorts of logical fallacies, or it's not a very credible survey that is being put out. It's a survey by some agency which doesn't have a global credibility in that manner, and you cannot make a generalized argument out there. So this is how AWT is. I will leave it to now Shreyansh to give his own examples and give you his flavor of having cleared an AWT and working towards it. Shreyansh, over to you.
Yeah, so let me begin with my own AWT only. So that would be the best thing to comment on. So my AWT was that there are a lot of state boards in India, and there is a central board. So if the central board is existing and if its policies are implemented, the education would be much more efficient in a way, and there would be standardization of education, and people would get equal opportunities in terms of educations. So why do state boards exist? So that was kind of the topic for my AWT. So now I it was a relate. So in AWT, basically your correlation is not causation. You have to have that in mind and then attack the question, attack the correlations whatever are made in the AWT. So for example, in this case, we can say that sometimes standardization is not good. By giving examples ki you have this language barriers in different places. So if you are making some assumptions ki if there is a standardization, everyone will grow, everyone will benefit from that. So it's not really making sense, right? Because there can be a lot of things which are specific to different individuals, people coming from different regions, and India is such a big country. You cannot say that every person has a same education need. So you can make such arguments in that. And apart from that, in state boards there are different languages which are focused upon, and people who want to have these languages in their sorts can basically easily learn. So that was the reasoning behind the NEP 2020 as well. So you can state such examples, and you can also state that state boards also make you competitive in a way that they have languages such as English which are used at the higher level. So in no way state boards are creating some sort of discrepancy in the system and reducing the standardization. So such kind of arguments can be given. So the only way in AWT is to attack the correlations which are there in the problem statement and give counter examples. And you can find 2 to 3 correlations if you look carefully and attack them and easily make 2 to 3 arguments. And I think those much arguments are more or less sufficient for you to write a good AWT.
I think that's an excellent one, and over a period of time, AWTs have become simpler, except for one or few sessions where some AWTs were really, really complicated. And in that case, if it's complicated for you guys are smart enough. All those who are sitting for IIM Ahmedabad process, typically fall in a very similar intellectual capabilities. It's just a matter of who is well prepared and who is more thought out in terms of answering that. Typically, one last thing on not just AWT. One thing with IIM Ahmedabad is their interview is rigorous here. I think it's rigorous amongst all of Holy Trinity, because for B you can still rely on SOP and get an icebreaker on that SOP, and once they catch you on SOP and if they find a weak link, then maybe you are in a toss. But in general, they're very polite, kind, and grill you most on SOP, and then having a higher work experience cohort, they typically deal you with work experience, right? And given you are still working in that industry, your familiarity in remembering those work instances are much easier than remembering your core curriculum. Calcutta has been a quant heavy institute, so they typically tend to ask puzzles and other things, and typical MBS front. And I think I'm the easiest among the three Holy Trinity campuses in terms of interview. Ahmedabad, on other hand, can grill you on anything, which effectively means your undergraduate subjects can also come at play, right? And what they're not looking at is your familiarity with it. They're looking for you to logically break these things down for them. So even if you don't remember a lot of it, if you can logically come up with an answer, that shows you can stand IIM Ahmedabad. Otherwise, it's a very clear downside for them that you're not made for that campus, because typically the amount of workload that IIM Ahmedabad will throw you in the first year, or at least before summers, one should be really made of some different skin, at least for some initial days when you're thrown in that soup and in the deep end of the pool to deal with it. So they want that kind of metal in you to be there. So with IIM Ahmedabad, be very clear. Don't meander. Don't complicate things. Don't venture into territory where you have very little clue. Okay? अगर quantitative easing नहीं पता है तो मत बोलना.
Like IIM, there is a term known as globe.
हाँ.
So
globe नहीं बोलना है.
Professors easily catch your globe.
Yes, and every single professor can catch you. This is true for Holy Trinity along, but with Ahmedabad, they pride themselves in this. So, and by the way, at the end of 2 years, the most globe speaking audience that comes out of all IIM campuses is Ahmedabad.
So we have a lot of globe courses here,
Yes.
and we globe hell of a lot. And these professors know when we are globing and when we are giving quantitative, like logical solutions. So they have experienced all sorts of tips and tricks from our classes, and you cannot fool them.
Yes, and they're very good with memory. Yeah? They've been teachers for very long. Every year they see a bunch of students like you trying to fake their ways in some ways into those campuses, right? So they know it. And typically, I come from a management consulting background. I, work alongside IIM Ahmedabad, Bangalore, Calcutta graduates, across levels. And typically I see they do a lot of globe. They're able to, put in a tough client situation, in a very new situation, they put something randomly, they will put it up and, make sure we are out of that situation before we can go back and draw and come back with an analysis. So they do that, but these professors are very good at it. So your leadership or building an organizational fluidity, or my dream of building something on these jargons, avoid it. If you're saying leadership, know what leadership is. Otherwise, if they point you out, tell me what leadership is. I'm telling you, you are down the rabbit hole against a professor who might be teaching leadership at IIM Ahmedabad, and you don't want to be in that zone. It's a tough zone to be in there. Leave that zone for those classes where you still have leverage, because they don't end up failing anyone. Though IIM campuses are tough, everyone gets a pass. So leave that. This is a very strong input for IIM Ahmedabad. Don't venture into things where you can't defend your territory. I'm telling you, that will become a make or break. There will be a chance to make a comeback, but if a shallowness is proved in any case, you're gone. I'm not scaring you guys off, but you're just putting this in your mind that, typically this is what within Ahmedabad we have observed. So just keep that in mind. Correlation is not causation. लिख लो अपनी दीवार पे. 90% cases में काम आने वाला है. ठीक है? Most AWTs you can make that argument, because in life also you can always make that argument. Correlation is not causation. Causation is a tough thing to prove. Regression में और सीखोगे, causation is a tough thing to prove. So that's it for IIM Ahmedabad. Now we can take questions, and then Shubham will float the exercise whenever he floats, and 4 or 5 of mentors who are along with me will evaluate. So Shreyansh will also evaluate some of these AWTs. There's Akanksha who will evaluate. I would evaluate some of them. And what we have followed in the past is some of the good AWTs that come from your batch, we're going to share it across so that everyone gets a chance to read what is good AWTs, because we don't have a sample AWT in any case. What we can definitely give you is pointers, but there is no sample AWT, because if we give a sample AWT, we are actually defeating the purpose of an AWT, because there cannot be a sample AWT that holds a golden standard of an AWT. But definitely we'll share some good 3-5 AWTs that we get from your batch. I'm open to questions. Shreyansh is also open to questions. We can answer it.
Yeah, so I had a question, like, can we mention both the sides while in a AWT, or should we just stick to one side and then explain all the points there?
I think both sides. And Shreyansh, you have an opinion? Both sides is okay.
Yeah, it is not about sides. It is about catching the fallacies in the argument and like presenting it out in the open. That's it.
No, like you mentioned, like about state board and CBSE. So there are benefits to both. And then do we have to have an opinion on that, or is it just like, yeah, we can break down the
So you just have
argument?
to catch the fallacies in the argument which is given.
Hmm.
Bring out the fallacies in your 2 or 3 paragraphs, whatever you write, and then maybe go ahead with a conclusion. Ki balanced, you can have a balanced opinion on that. Not a problem. You can have an opinion which tilts on one side as well. So again, not a problem. But the most important part is you being able to catch those fallacies in the argument.
Okay.
Yeah. Fallacies is very important. Typically, when we score people who catch fallacies, we tend to give them higher marks, because that's what they're looking for. And typically, that's the central thing of it.
And if you want to practice all of that, like I think Yash might have told you that GMAT AWTs are a very good
I
thing.
think they borrowed it from there only.
Yeah, so those are very good things to practice. You can look on like websites like GMAT Club Forum as well. There are a lot of examples there as well if you want to practice more of it.
Yeah. GMAT, even GRE has a lot of fallacies, but GMAT has a separate section on it.
Yeah.
Sorry, Shreyansh, I had some work call and I missed the word count and time. Can you just come in and just
I think he has not told. Shreyansh, can you tell what's the time limit? I forgot.
Time limit is about 15 minutes from what I recall.
15. So keep
15 to 20 minutes.
20 minutes is, I think, I remember, but I think 15-20 minutes then.
Yeah, that's the time. But anyways, that would be same for all the candidates, so you can adjust according to it.
So I was thinking, if I start thinking through and start getting points, and like I'm if I spend up around 5-6 minutes thinking through the points, then I have only 8 minutes or 6-7 minutes to typically write that.
Yeah, it's very so see, typically on this I say, if you have a very slow typing speed and it's typed out, Shreyansh, right?
No, I think it would be written if they call you on center.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
it's offline this time.
Oh, offline. So then you have to write it out, na? So if you have a slow
it's
writing.
offline every time. Last time also it was offline. We went to the centers and wrote it.
Oh, so Ahmedabad had a center-based thing. So in that case, you're writing. Okay, so then we won't allow you type submissions. So भैया writing देख लेना. If you're slow writers ना, then don't spend too much time on thinking. पहली बार में 2 बार में पढ़ के तुम्हें central policy समझ में आ जाएगा. And typically it's not very tough to figure out that central policy. If it's tough, then एक बार और read करके थोड़ा दिमाग लगा लेना. Otherwise, just form something out of it. In the case you're simply not able to come up with anything, general gyan is what you will have to put in. Don't leave an empty page. At least get graded on it.
And try to constrain your whatever you write in a single page, because from what I recall, a single page is given and you cannot write beyond that.
The beyond the single page, so वैसे भी वो skim through करते हैं. I don't think so they read it completely, but they skim through very fast. So
like VAT में I saw a lot of submissions
even I saw a lot of submissions which were very long. Don't go beyond 1 month. A4 piece, 1 page. That's what you get. The other side of the page is generally rough work, which is not even looked at.
Yeah.
So 20 minutes and 1 page A4 side is what you have.
And one big question is, like, for example, the NGO which we just discussed here, for example, and there was one guy who got Nobel Prize and all, right? If I don't if I don't have any data or facts to back that up, like I have my argument, I can always defy you are not correct, but to say, like, I can say you are not correct, I can prove that, but to say what more could be done, and I don't know that. So like, how could
So,
we fill that gap?
like, to answer your question, like, I think from my perspective, VAT has something which like requires some sort of prior knowledge, but AWT is something which requires absolutely no prior knowledge. You just have to figure out the logical fallacies and point them out, and if even if you don't state your examples from what you remember, that is fine. The fact that you have caught their fallacies is the most crucial point.
That's absolutely correct. That's absolutely some of the best AWTs we have evaluated in last 2-3 years are the ones without any example, ones which have completely focused on logic and fallacies in that entire structure. Best AWTs that we have evaluated, and those guys have done really well. They're about to get placed in some of the good consulting firms also, graduating this year. Last year also, I remember people who were writing really good AWTs who are the ones who were, not using a lot of prior knowledge.
And one section was that the introduction section. So it was kind of like a hook. Like, how can you, like, there is a very thin line between hook and globe, right? What he just said. So how can you just barge in that thin line? Like, how can you?
No, there's not a thin line between. There's a very thick line, as thick as you can want it to be. Typically, having a structure helps out. So if you can follow it, it's good enough. Otherwise, it's not. In an introduction, what typically in an AWT you would do is you start straight away attack what is out there in this. So your policy actually gets a first mention straight away in your introduction. So that's the context you're straight away setting, and building up in subsequent paragraphs and possibly moving to an ambivalent conclusion. So that's one approach that you can follow. In an VAT, an introduction sets the context. Again, by context, I don't mean that it is a globe opening. You're not writing a fancy editorial for an Indian Express. You're writing it for an evaluative purpose for a serious reader, and not for a non-calent reader, right? So in that case, even an introduction in VAT shouldn't be a globe introduction, or typically some people prefer having anecdotes, quotations, and all. If you know it well and good, you can put it up, it becomes a creative write-up, but I don't think so. Even there, attacking the problem straight head on and setting the context of what is coming in subsequent paragraphs is going to be very helpful. Or at least, if not, you're not able to do that, it's defining the topic helps. If you're not able to get the introduction, define the topic. That helps. More questions? Good enough then. I think this is good enough. You have Shreyansh, you have a few other mentors from IIM Ahmedabad. Feel free to reach out to them to get a grips on AWTs. Most important thing I'm telling you, AWTs are very simple. It is easier than VAT. It's the courage to face it that matters. That courage will come out of at least some 3-4 good practices that you will do. Once you have that familiarity, you will ace it. If you face first AWT on the day of your IIM Ahmedabad interview, you might still ace it, but not the most pleasant scenario to be in. If you
like you just have your PI after your AWT. So if that does not go well, there are a lot of chances that you might be nervous for the PI as well.
And unless you have all Holy Trinity calls, if Ahmedabad, spoiling Ahmedabad anyway is a bad feeling. But if you have Holy Trinity calls, then still you have something to back it up, saying A kharab hua, B sahi kar lenge, C sahi kar lenge. But if you have A and then you have L or C or something like that, you don't have comparable colleges. I think giving a best shot is what matters. At least you should come out saying, I gave my best, or I gave my decent version. I didn't spoil it up. So just that's why I'm saying practice and AWT helps. It's very similar to case interviews and guest teammates.
So have they released the dates for interview and AWT?
No, not yet.
ये तो तुम्हें तो बताना चाहिए यार, अंदर
अरे
बैठे campus के।
यार यहाँ पे तो आई थिंक ये लोग सबसे लास्ट में करेंगे बिकॉज द एडमिशंस ऑफिस एंड पीजीपीओ इज सफरिंग विद कोविड सो
अभी कब है प्लेसमेंट, कब है उस पर डिपेंड करेगा।
प्लेसमेंट्स तो कल से है।
अच्छा, C1 is starting tomorrow.
Yeah, C1 is
So
tomorrow.
guys, tomorrow get news in your WhatsApp group. Typically, McKinsey will be hiring 50 plus from IIM Ahmedabad, and that will be a record benchmark number in this country ever. Last time already they had broken records. I think this time ISB is doing some chest thumping that we have made some good numbers. Once IIM Ahmedabad numbers are out, proportionately one would realize what IIM Ahmedabad is. McKinsey's favorite campus.
Yeah, one small question I had. So you mentioned that after AWT, you have a PI just after that.
Yeah.
So is it like they skim through the AWT and can they ask us questions on that in the PI or?
From what I gathered in one of the interviews that happened, and like they have a lot of better things to ask you in the PI rather than again going on in the on the AWT. So like from what I can tell from my batchmates' experience as well, that IIM Ahmedabad interviews typically challenge you at 1 or 2 points. So a lot of the other interviews are based on your experience and what you have faced in life and from where you come. But the thing is, IIM Ahmedabad give you 1 or 2 challenging questions which test your thinking ability. So that is something they are very passionate about. Professors are very keen to question you on that.
Could you give us some example like from your interviews?
Wait, I will give you an example. Let me give you example. I had a very good example on taxes, something on taxes. Government is, useless. It's useless to collect taxes because typically you still have the problems in this country. You still have poverty. You still have bad infrastructure. You still have why should we be paying taxes? It's a completely useless way because we're not getting the services in return, and even the problems that are supposed to be solved through redistribution of income, that is not happening, right? And what are your thoughts on that? Now they will start, possibly they can pin you a point and check your reasoning and check your thinking on that. This is one example that I can think of on top of my head. Again, Shreyansh, up to you.
So from what I recall from my interview, one thing, so they opened with a challenging question. They asked me, I was working with Indian Oil before joining IIM Ahmedabad, and they asked me the share price trend of Indian Oil. And then after that, they told me that, okay, Indian Oil is giving you X amount of salary, and people in the banks are given Y amount of salary, and this Y is much lesser than X, and your share price is declining over a long term, and the bank's share price is increasing over a long term. How can you defend your salary?
Anyone would like to attempt this? Someone from PSU background, oil and gas? I think people are already scared of IIM Ahmedabad now. By the way, how did you defend it, Shreyansh?
So I told them that the thing is, Indian Oil is moving towards new areas